This video covers these topics. First, we will briefly overview them. Then, we will examine the details. Collective consciousness is a term that means the totality of beliefs and sentiments shared in common by the average members of a society, as defined in the division of labor in society. Definition: collective representations is a term that means the way in which a group thinks about itself in relation to the objects it considers significant, as defined in the rules of sociological method. Collective consciousness and collective representations are essentially the same in meaning, but Durkheim used the term collective consciousness less frequently after the publication of Suicide. In the division of labor in society, collective consciousness was used in a broad sense, referring to the average beliefs of members of a society. However, since Suicide, the term collective representations has been used more frequently and refers to narrower scopes of social consciousness within society, such as the beliefs of Protestant groups. It can be considered that the difference between the two is not only a matter of scope but can also be explained by the concepts of internal and external social facts. Collective consciousness relates to more abstract and invisible internal social facts, while collective representations concern more concrete and visible external social facts. For example, statistics and laws regarding suicide are visible and thus referred to as collective representations, whereas social solidarity and segmentary society are associated with collective consciousness. Emile Durkheim, born in 1858, died in 1917, was a French sociologist who is widely regarded as one of the founding figures of sociology, along with Max Weber and Georg Simmel. He was the first person to hold a university position specifically dedicated to sociology. Durkheim viewed society as an entity that exists independently of individuals and argued that social facts should be studied objectively. He was committed to establishing sociology as a scientific discipline. First, we will explain the premise of this video series. In this series, we will mainly focus on the following major works by Emile Durkheim. First, here is the overall structure of Durkheim's The Division of Labor in Society. This video focuses specifically on the topic of collective consciousness and collective representations. The remaining topics will be discussed in the next video. If you find this video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel. It will motivate me to create the next one. In this session, we'll mainly cover the 8th topic. I will explain the concepts of collective consciousness and collective representations, which are key terms in Durkheim's sociology. Collective consciousness is a term that means the totality of beliefs and sentiments shared in common by the average members of a society, as defined in the division of labor in society. In simple terms, it refers to the shared ways of thinking and feeling among members of a society. For example, in American society, many people share the belief that children should become independent once they reach a certain age. After the publication of Suicide, the term collective consciousness came to be used less frequently. Collective representations is a term that means the way in which a group thinks about itself in relation to the objects it considers significant, as defined in the rules of sociological method. This term has been more commonly used since the publication of Suicide. According to the sociologist Michio Nakajima, collective consciousness and collective representations are essentially the same in meaning, and there is little significance in distinguishing between them. This is because both concepts include not only cognitive elements but also moral and religious dimensions. Durkheim used the term collective consciousness less frequently because he wanted to give a new theoretical status to the concept of collective representations. While collective consciousness referred broadly to beliefs and sentiments shared by the average members of an entire society, collective representations were used to describe more differentiated and specific forms of consciousness. For example, these may include shared ideas and values held uniquely by groups such as doctors, politicians, or Protestants. In general, the term representation means the symbolic expression of the meaning or image associated with something. In other words, it refers to the attempt to make something invisible visible in some form. If we understand collective representations as the visible forms of collective consciousness, I begin to wonder whether there might be some merit in distinguishing between the two. It may be the case that the term external social facts is more appropriate for embodying the meaning of representation than the concept of collective representations itself. If we understand collective consciousness and collective representations as differing only in scope or degree of differentiation, and if we consider both as internal social facts that can be identified through external social facts, the overall picture becomes somewhat clearer. Durkheim distinguishes between internal social facts, which are invisible, and external social facts, which are visible. For example, social solidarity is an internal social fact because it is not directly observable. The problem lies in how to prove its existence. The clues to this proof come from external social facts, such as statistical data that objectively represent averages or other measurable indicators. Please subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up.